Greetings, fellow seekers, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marty, and I am a shamanic witch. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about what shamanic witchcraft is, how it relates to other practices, and how it can be a healing modality for the toxic culture that we currently live in. Shamanism and witchcraft both are practices which date back more than 100,000 years to the beginnings of the human imagination. They have been practiced in all cultures around the globe in some form or another. They belong to no creed or belief system and can be practiced with any philosophical worldview or outlook. They are the birthright of all humans, and the healing powers and modalities available to us through these disciplines are available to all humans. Some of the benefits of practicing both shamanism and witchcraft are increased confidence and well-being, deeper relationships, more meaningful relationships both with ourselves and with others, increased intuitive abilities, access to information that is otherwise not available through ordinary means, more compassion, more wisdom, and so much more. Witchcraft provides us with a set of tools and practices which allow us to manipulate non-ordinary reality in order to manifest our will on the physical plane. It helps us to get in touch with our own divine nature and to stand in our empowerment. One who is wise, one who knows. When we practice witchcraft, we accept both the power and responsibility of working alongside the hands of fate to weave the tapestry of our own destiny. Witchcraft helps us to face our shadows and to clear the lens of our mind of the false perceptions which we have taken on over our lifetime. It helps us to stand in our own authentic empowerment and to use our unique magic in the world to be an agent of transformation and change, not only for ourselves, but for all beings. Anyone can claim their personal power to become a witch. Shamanism is the ancient practice of using ecstatic trance states in order to leave the body and travel into the spirit realm. In the ethnographic literature, this is typically talked about as the shaman's soul entering the spiritual realm. In modern common vernacular, we often talk about the astral body, the energetic body, and the astral realms. It is my belief that when we talk about use these different vocabularies, we're actually talking about the same thing, just at different scopes or from different perspectives. So I tend to use these words interchangeably, which is why I call myself a shamanic witch rather than a shaman. Because I also haven't trained in ancient shamanic practices. I have taken courses in shamanism, and I've studied other people who would consider themselves to be shamans, or that I would consider to be shamans at any rate. But I'm not somebody who was raised within a traditional shamanic culture, and so that doesn't feel within integrity to call myself a shaman. And so I prefer the term shamanic witch, because even though I am a shamanic practitioner and I use shamanic techniques within my witchcraft, I definitely more strongly identify with the role of witch rather than the role of shaman. Shamanism is about opening all of our energy centers so that we become the hollow bone, a very clear channel of spiritual energy, of helpful energy, of healing energy. A lot of shamanic practice is about learning to unburden our ego so that it becomes small. We never want to destroy the ego, though. The ego is something that protects us. It is a tool, just like our mind and our bodies are tools, just like our spirit body is a tool. All of these things are in and of themselves, not important, right? It's the whole package together working in unison that brings us into enlightenment. And so learning how to use each of these tools and bring them into balance is really the key to the shamanic practice. And so learning to make our ego as small as it can be, and so that we are in control of the ego rather than the ego being in control of us, helps us to become very aware of our power, of our abilities, of our role in society, of our calling even. And so I've found that combining these two practices is incredibly powerful, because the witch part really helps one to become strong in their own and understand their own spiritual landscape, and to create those spiritual boundaries around themselves as an empowered and sovereign and immanent being. And then shamanism is really about exploring that outer landscape and connecting with our community and using that personal magic out in that community, whether that's our just a purely spiritual community, or we want to also then connect with our physical community as a spiritual being and bring healing in that way. In witchcraft, we're usually on our personal path. We're kind of finding our own way. Whereas in shamanism, it's a little bit more community oriented. So I kind of see these as like layers on a cake. We really need to understand our own personal beliefs and our own spiritual foundation, and then we kind of connect with community. So witchcraft is the basis of my practice, and then shamanic practices are how I then connect with my community. And of course, that's just my own personal like preference and belief and style, that I've developed over a decade plus of spiritual exploration. I like to incorporate yoga and Buddhism. For me, a lot of these paths really, they all have wisdom to offer, and when you learn to read between the lines, you find where they overlap. And by finding those places where they overlap and resonate for you, you can really curate a personal path of enlightenment and empowerment. And you really release yourself from like needing other people to believe the same thing as you. You become very confident in your own divine nature, basically. As shamanic practitioners, our goal is to sort of combine all of our strengths as though we are a single human organism, reaching for a more verdant and just future for all beings. For many of us, when we begin seeking and moving away from the spiritual or religious traditions that we were raised with, we may be looking for a perfect fit or a right way to do something, or to achieve enlightenment. But the longer we tread this path, the more we discover those overlapping beliefs. And we find that the shamanic witch actually seeks the same wisdom as the mystic, though our means may differ and the way that we interpret energy might be different. One of the really powerful things about being a witch is that you learn to accept paradox, and the idea that even if we have contradictory interpretations of the same experience, or even contradictory experiences of the same ritual, right? They're both beautiful, and they're both valid, and they're both whatever needed to show up for each of us at that time, right? We're all on our separate journey, and wherever we are on that journey, it's important to meet each other there, rather than trying to say, well, this is the right way, or here, you got to come over to this path, or whatever. Whatever is right for me is right for me, and whatever is right for you is right for you. There is no right way. There is just the right way for an individual. Shamanic witchcraft helps us to learn to see the currents of energy that are all around us, and to either lean into their pool or to steer away from them, in order to create the life that we desire. It is a path of seeking our highest spiritual expression as defined by the self. It requires no tools, but it is benefited by, say, a journal, some candles, some incense, a drum or a rattle. But knowing always that the only thing necessary in order to travel in the spiritual realms and to achieve spiritual enlightenment, to have spiritual experiences, the only thing necessary is yourself. And allowing yourself to have those experiences, inviting those experiences, inviting your spiritual guides to speak with you. Because the truth is that we are all sovereign beings, and we carry within us this connection to the divine source from which we are all born. But this divine source cannot talk to us. Our spirit guides cannot speak to us through this divine source unless we give them permission, because we are sovereign beings. So a lot of shamanic witchcraft is about developing this awareness of our divine source and our intuition, and developing a relationship with our guardians and the spirit beings that are really here to help us in our life to achieve our highest spiritual expression. It is a path of questioning, of learning, of exploration, of experimenting. It is a path of direct revelation, so it requires you to be the practitioner. It is not a participatory path. It is not for people who just want to show up to church and listen to the reverend talk, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that. If that's helps you to connect spiritually and you otherwise have your own practices and time for prayer or whatever, meditation, then that's totally valid as well. But for many of us who grew up feeling unsatisfied with being a participant in our spiritual practice, shamanic witchcraft really provides us with that opportunity to instead be a practitioner. Witchcraft in general, I would say, and shamanism in general, just as general paths, not even shamanic witchcraft itself, they are very practitioner-based. They are all about direct revelation, direct experiential revelation, and personal gnosis. It's all about your personal experience and knowing what is true for you, uncovering those truths for yourself, and experimenting with different tools and modalities and techniques in order to find what works for you and gets you into that energetic space where you can be free to travel and to see what you want to see. Personally, scientifically speaking, I'm actually a nihilist. I mean, we're all going to die, right? Like, the universe is going to become cold, the sun's going to explode and swallow the earth, all of these things are going to happen in billions of years from now, right? And nothing will matter. But so, I mean, that's kind of freeing, right? Like, we don't have to believe in anything. Nothing matters, and technically nothing is real, right? It's all just gonna one day. It's not gonna exist or matter or mean anything. We can't prove that anything is real beyond what we can measure, and we can't disprove anything is real just because we can't measure it. And so, why not believe in something beautiful? Why not partake of the beautiful, joyous, sensuous nature of life, right? I mean, it's full of ups and downs, but without the downs, we wouldn't appreciate the ups, right? And so shamanic witchcraft really invites us to lean into this sensuality and to create new stories wherein we're not sinful, we're not dirty just because we exist, just because we're humans. We're not even separate from nature. We are of nature. And because we are of nature, we are beautiful, divine beings that deserve ecstatic joy, that deserve compassion, that deserve love and peace and tranquility. And we really have the creative power within ourselves to make that our life. We just have to step into that power. We have to access that power and then use it to shape our lives. We become sort of artists, and our life becomes a painting. Shamanism and witchcraft both, while neither of them are tied to any creed or belief, they are often nature-based, earth-centered practices, which invariably lead us towards an appreciation for the natural world, and bridge the gap between this Western idea that the material world and the spiritual world are two separate things, and that one has to be above the other, where in fact it's more of a spectrum, right? They're actually interlaced with each other, and the physical bleeds into the spiritual bleeds into the physical, and they're inextricably linked. Like, you can't separate them, you can't pull them apart. We learn to relinquish the view that science and nature are at odds, or that science and spirituality are at odds, or that magic and intuitive abilities are somehow supernatural. In the view of the shamanic witch, there is nothing outside of nature. All things are nature. Nature is all things. And so magic and psychic abilities work not because they're supernatural or outside of physical reality, but because physical reality and spiritual reality are the same thing. And there are actually 7 spiritual laws. I'll have to do a video about that later, which guide the principles of how energy works when it's moving in between the physical and the spiritual, or even between physical and spiritual, right? There's all these rules, and science describes for us like our physical reality really well, but it does not describe for us. And at this time, with the technology we currently have available, we cannot measure spiritual domain. We actually can neither prove nor disprove the spiritual domain. And so opening ourselves up to these experiences allows them to come through for us. Shamanic witchcraft allows us to transform our stories. And when we transform our stories, we transform the world around us. Are you a shamanic witch? Tell me about your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if you'd like to learn more about shamanic witchcraft, be sure to like and subscribe this video.